August 1957. In the skies above Missouri, an Air Force plane is in trouble. Out of gas, pilot and crew bail out. What happens next would become the stuff of legend. The unpiloted plane should have crashed. Instead, it makes a perfect landing. This is the story of the DC-3. The plane that defined the way we fly. It heralded a new era of air travel.
It was very glamorous. It was mostly celebrities and businessmen.
And became a war hero.
I've seen them come in with holes in the wings and the motor shot out, everything else.
A maverick from its inception.
Here comes the Douglas Company coming in with, we're going to give you something revolutionary here.
Its development laid the cornerstones of aviation as we know it today.
It is truly the linchpin of American and global air transport.
It's the plane that created a revolution and changed the world. June 5th, 1944. The night before D-Day. 13,000 US paratroopers board a fleet of C-47 planes bound for France. It's the biggest airborne operation in history. Among those aboard is 21-year-old Don Jakeway of the 82nd Airborne Division.
We were sitting on the plane as we're going over. I was kind of sitting back and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here?
They'll need to fly low over territory bristling with German anti-aircraft guns. But their planes have no weapons, nor even protective armor. Because the C-47 is actually a DC-3, a passenger plane, lightly modified for the military. The odds of surviving their mission are horrendous.
General Ridgway said, you can expect 85% casualty rate. That means 85 out of 100 will not make it.
But the paratroopers have faith that the big ugly plane they call the Goonie Bird will get them to their destination. One of the pilots that night is Julian Bud Rice.
C-47 tended to flap their wings like a bird out there, you know. They had very large wingspan, and so they tended to bounce around a lot. They were very reliable.
The fleet fly in close formation, according to plan, across the English Channel. But on reaching France, they run into trouble.
We hit landfall. Suddenly, there was a land fog. Everyone in the formation disappeared from sight. It was total blackout.
When Bud emerges from the fog, all hell breaks loose.
When I came out, I could see a lot of planes hit my flak and exploding in the air. And others that maybe collided, went down. This was 5 minutes of just sheer terror.
The Allies are depending on the C-47s to make it through, deliver the paratroopers, and help liberate France from Hitler's clutches. It's a heavy burden for a military aircraft, let alone for a plane that began life as a regular passenger airliner. Its story begins in 1932 with the arrival of a letter at the offices of airplane manufacturer, the Douglas Aircraft Company. Addressed to company boss Donald Douglas, it comes from Jack Fry, head of TWA, then a new airline with big ambitions. This is no routine business letter. It would prove to be the birth certificate of a plane that would revolutionize air travel. In the 30s, the passenger airline business is still in its infancy, and flying is wildly expensive.
The cost of a ticket to California from New York was about $300. It still is. But in 1930, that could buy you a car.
With the US in the midst of the Great Depression, flying is strictly for the super rich. But a flight aboard an early commercial airplane is far from luxurious.
You see the advertisements and everyone's happy and smiling and eating well. But that was not the reality.
They were noisy, drafty, uncomfortable, relatively slow. You had a lot of engine fumes and gas and waste under the cockpit. People did not feel very well necessarily after flying these.
You were flying 5,000 feet above the surface, so you were in the very turbulent air. On a lovely, calm day, you had a very smooth ride. If not, you were bounced all over the sky.
Worse, taking a flight in the early passenger planes could be downright dangerous. In 1931, disaster strikes. A TWA plane with 8 people on board crashes into a Kansas prairie.
An airplane fell apart literally in the sky, killing all its passengers, one of whom was Newt Rockne, the legendary football coach of Notre Dame.
It wasn't weather, it wasn't pilot error, that the darn thing had rotted out from inside.
The crash is a wake-up call to the airline industry. Before air travel could become profitable, it first had to become safe and affordable.
Fear of flying, if the airplane was going to come apart in some way, or fares that they were so expensive that only the very wealthy could fly. Those are the two things holding back the growth of aviation.
Boeing is the first to respond with a new plane that would electrify the industry. The Boeing 247.
The Boeing 247 is considered the world's first modern airliner.
Boeing's new plane is 50% faster than the widely used Ford Trimotor, while using a fifth less horsepower.
Incredibly efficient.
Its monoplane design, with one set of low-lying cantilevered wings, minimizes drag. It is robustly made of aluminium alloy and is stable in flight, which makes for a more comfortable ride.
All these were very important factors that made the 247 a revolutionary airplane.
United Airlines promptly orders 59 247s, an order that would keep Boeing busy for 2 years. That leaves United with the best plane on the market and its rivals out in the cold.
The Boeing company made it very clear to the airlines that you can have our 247 after United has all theirs.
One airline isn't prepared to wait. The boss of TWA issues his momentous challenge to the aviation industry. Build me a plane to rival the 247.
Among the companies that responded to that was the Douglas Company of California, headed by Donald Douglas.
Donald Douglas was one of the great names in aviation history. He'd been around since the very beginning.
Douglas is a trained engineer and highly respected in the business.
His word was his bond. He made countless deals selling airplanes on a handshake and paperwork to follow. He was that well respected.
Douglas is renowned for building sturdy planes for the military. But TWA bosses don't just want a 247 clone. They want something bigger. and better.
The 247 still did not go far enough, and that's where Douglas capitalized, using the 247 as an example of what could be done, but then going beyond it.
Designing a passenger plane to beat the game-changing Boeing 247 is going to be no easy feat. So Donald Douglas puts his best man on the job. His protege, engineer Arthur Raymond.
Raymond is an authentic American genius, a man with drive and ambition. Doug foresees him not only as a top flight engineer, also somebody who will get the job done.
Douglas gives Raymond just 7 days to come up with a design. The spec is ambitious. The new plane would need to be able to fly 25% further, 1,600 kilometers non-stop, and carry 12 passengers, 2 more than the 247. It's a big gamble. If Raymond gets the design right, it would transform the fortunes of the Douglas Aircraft Company. If he fails to deliver, the company faces bankruptcy. August 1932. Douglas Aircraft's mastermind engineer, Arthur Raymond, pitches the design for their new passenger aircraft, the DC-1, to TWA. They are taken aback by what they see.
When TWA saw the initial concepts for this machine, there was a big question mark because it was a twin-engine airplane.
The Boeing 247 had proved that 2 engines could work. But still reeling after the Kansas air crash, TWA had specifically demanded 3 engines, 2 to fly and 1 as a safety precaution.
The aerodynamics was so poor for the aircraft of those days that if a twin-engine design lost power in 1 engine, it would simply descend, and you needed a 3rd engine to give it any chance at all of remaining aloft.
Here comes the Douglas Company coming in with, no, we're not going to give you what you thought you wanted. We're going to give you something revolutionary here.
TWA's technical advisor was none other than Charles Lindbergh, who'd flown the first solo transatlantic flight 5 years earlier. Lindbergh is skeptical that a plane this size could survive losing an engine.
Will this thing fly?
Yes, definitely going to fly.
If you can make it fly, then we'll buy it.
Raymond bet the company on the DC-1. Their costs were not covered in the original contract. They weren't going to make money on this thing until after they had delivered over a certain number of airplanes.
Raymond had used a complex aeronautical formula to design the DC-1. To prove it could fly on 1 engine, he turns to nearby Caltech, which is pioneering a new aviation technology, wind tunnel testing.
One can arguably say that the Douglas DC-1 represented the first scientifically designed American airplane, and playing the key role in doing that was really the tunnel tests that were done at Caltech.
The initial tests are deeply troubling. Despite the bold promises to TWA, the DC-1 is fundamentally unstable and prone to turbulence, even with both engines working normally.
It had to do pretty much with the center of gravity problem and how this wing and the fuselage fit together.
Raymond doesn't give up. The team conducts more than 200 tunnel tests before coming up with a solution. Like other aircraft of the time, the plane's wings are set at right angles to the fuselage. Raymond discovers that sweeping back the wings shifts the center of gravity, dramatically improving the plane's stability.
The wing design proved so successful But really, if we take a look at a lot of subsequent aircraft, we see that they all tend to emulate that moderate swept-back approach.
And to minimize turbulence and drag between the wing and the fuselage, engineers devise an element called a fillet.
That lovely little compound curve you see between where the wing meets the fuselage, it smoothed it out considerably.
These modifications create a plane that should be able to maintain stable flight, even on a single engine. Wind tunnel testing has come a long way since the early days to become a fundamental part of the aviation design process. The Airbus A380 went through 5,000 hours of wind tunnel tests, finessing everything from ice prevention to noise reduction. Back in the 30s, the Douglas team are grappling with the problem of how to slow down a large and powerful plane on landing. Their solution would become an integral feature of modern airplane design.
Back then, you didn't really have runways. You had large fields. You can't ask the city to build a whole new airport for you just for your one airplane. So you try to make the airplane fit. So how do you slow it down, slow enough to have a comfortable landing, yet maintain the ability to go fast? And one of the solutions is flaps.
Wing flaps, as pioneered by Douglas, are now used on all modern airliners. On approach and landing, lowering the flaps helps to bring the plane to a halt more quickly. And while lowered for takeoff, they dramatically increase a plane's lift, meaning it can take off at slower speeds, using shorter runways. The DC-1 never went into production, but acts as a stepping stone to an even better version. In May 1934, Douglas reveals their new plane, the DC-2, a 14-seater. It's even faster and more powerful than its predecessor, and immediately sets the air industry alight.
The DC-2 came on the scene with a bang. TWA flew this brand new airliner across the country in record-setting time. We have an airplane that's faster than anything that even the Army has. It was very dramatic, got headlines.
The DC-2 could carry 4 more passengers than the rival Boeing 247. It offered a faster, smoother ride and needed fewer refueling stops. The plane is a hit, and Douglas production lines go into overdrive.
When the aircraft entered service, it was obviously the airplane to have, and immediately made the 247 obsolescent.
Douglas had scored a major coup against its rival Boeing. But its greatest contribution to commercial aviation is yet to come. May 1935. Orders are pouring in for the Douglas Aircraft Company's new plane, the DC-2.
Donald Douglas was looking at a full order book. As far as the eye can see, they're actually making money, which in those days is almost unheard of in aircraft production.
Then, Donald Douglas gets an unexpected call from the head of American Airlines. C.R. Smith wants the DC-2 for his fleet, but with a twist. He wants it adapted to create a sleeper aircraft with 14 beds in place of seats.
Donald Douglas absolutely convinced this is a terrible idea and don't want any part of it. The sleeper is a dead end, that there's only going to be a very few amount of these. There's not going to be a market for it. It's not going to work the way out the C.R. Smith thinks.
But then Smith hands Douglas an offer he can't refuse. An order for 10 Douglas sleeper transport planes to the value of $795,000, around $14 million in today's money. This is no simple design tweak. Accommodating beds means making the DC-2 a staggering 50% bigger.
Usually when you expand an airplane design, you stretch it, you literally stretch it. You make it longer. In this case, they actually widened it.
Early planes were built around a fuselage that resembled a flying box. But the inherent weakness of a square set tight limits on a plane's size. By the 30s, fuselages are becoming more rounded, making them stronger. Raymond and his team pushed things further than ever before. What they came up with is the world's biggest circular fuselage. A cylindrical shape is not only supremely aerodynamic, but also very strong, distributing forces evenly around the structure.
The round fuselage shape enhances the strength of the aircraft. There's no real failure points on it, no hard corners or anything like that. It's just a remarkably strong design.
Combined with the single-skin metal fuselage of the DC-1, which helps to support the structure, the new design would allow a big leap in size and weight. Douglas pulls it off again, creating the world's largest and most fuel-efficient modern airliner. Yet sleeper planes never catch on with passengers and are swiftly dropped. But Donald Douglas isn't about to stand by and see his groundbreaking new plane mothballed.
The more that Douglas and Raymond started thinking about it, then they started thinking beyond the sleeper transport. It didn't take long, it was very quick.
Douglas realizes that replacing the beds with seats would increase the number of passengers by 50%. The DC-3 is born. A wonder of engineering, it lays the foundations for the modern airliner. It takes 6,000 people and 500,000 rivets to build every one. Above all, since it uses only 3% more fuel than its predecessor, the extra 7 passengers the DC-3 could carry make it the first ever profitable commercial airliner. The Douglas team have achieved an extraordinary breakthrough, an airliner that makes mass air travel possible.
When the DC-3 came along, there was a real recognition that a new standard in air transport had arrived. Air transport was no longer merely the stuff of the adventurous, it was becoming routine.
Flying coast to coast had meant a 25-hour ordeal. Now, the DC-3 cuts that journey time almost in half. But above all, the DC-3 makes passengers feel safe.
It wasn't going to make strange noises. It wasn't going to smell funny with the gasoline fumes coming through. It was going to have heating in it, and so it wasn't going to be cold in wintertime. The whole key for the airline industry was to make this normal and safe, and the DC-3 makes it normal and safe.
It quickly became the airplane of choice of airlines all over the United States and quickly around the world, best they could get a hold of them.
Flying is now glamorous. The journey becomes the destination.
Would you like a cigarette, sir?
No, thank you. We'll have a magazine when you have time.
I'll bring one right up.
Thank you.
Passengers recline in new levels of luxury, not an option in smaller planes. The DC-3 helps to popularize a new role in aviation: the air hostess. Vicky Herrell was one of a new breed aboard TWA's DC-3 fleet in the 1940s.
It was very glamorous. I mean, TWA was known as the glamour airline. So it's mostly celebrities and businessmen. You really got to know your passengers. And the men would ask you, what your phone number was and stuff like that. Can I call you when I get to New York? Can we have dinner?
For the new air hostesses, working 3,000 meters up is better than any job back on the ground.
I enjoyed it so much. I mean, it was just exhilarating. I loved my job.
As one of the few jobs considered suitable for women, Competition is intense. In 1935, 2,000 women apply for just 43 positions offered by TWA. Entry requirements are tough. Applicants have to be between 1.52 m and 1.62 m and weigh between 45 and 53 kilos.
The weight restriction, well, they're very strict about that. And in fact, after you started flying, we had weight checks every 6 weeks. If you were caught like 3 or 4 times being overweight, then you were fired.
And the training isn't just about looking good.
We had to learn everything about an airplane, theory of flight. We studied meteorology, aerodynamics, because people weren't flying very much in those days. I mean, it was so new.
A key part of the job is reassuring passengers unused to flying.
And some people would be extremely nervous, and of course I would calm them, try and calm them down, and I could do that. I could do it.
And hostesses must come prepared for every eventuality.
They would wear a cape that had large pockets. And in this pocket, they would have to carry a wrench, a hammer, and a railway schedule. Because if, in fact, the weather got too rough, they would have to land the aircraft, and the stewardess would have to make sure that they knew what the train schedule was to take the customer to the train station.
6 years after its launch, the DC-3 has sparked an explosive 6-fold growth in US passenger miles. By 1939, 350 DC-3s have rolled out of the Douglas factory, making it the unassailable queen of the skies.
It's estimated well over 80% of all the airliners flying in the United States were DC-2s or 3s. It was just that good an airplane.
With the DC-3, commercial aviation came of age. No aircraft in history has earned a greater reputation for dependable service than this universally famous 21-passenger transport.
The DC-3 helps boost an economy still recovering from the Depression. Soon, it will be called upon to perform an even more momentous task, helping to save the world from a terrible new threat. In December 1941, the bombing of Pearl Harbor propels America into a conflict that spans the globe.
The crime of the century, death and destruction as gratitude for years of peace.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan, a state of war has existed.
The Army needs a rugged transport aircraft to shift troops and supplies to the front line. But creating a new plane from scratch would take too long. Luckily, the US government and military have already foreseen the need for just such a plane.
They took a look around at what the airlines were flying. They were flying superb transport planes, particularly the DC-3.
The order comes down. Get the DC-3 ready for war. A keen sailor, Douglas takes the team aboard his boat to brainstorm how to turn their airliner into a military transport plane.
It is kind of ironic when we think about it. A Skytrain suddenly turns itself into a military workhorse.
All they really did was put a cargo door on it and beefed up the floor so it could take heavy loads, and that was it. Such a great airplane, such a strong airplane. You know, they didn't have to modify much at all.
The DC-3 is reborn as the C-47. By 1944, a C-47 is rolling off the production lines every 34 minutes. Many of them destined for the British RAF, who call them Dakotas.
The DC-3 C-47 is an amazingly overbuilt airplane. They didn't know how much stress various designs could take, so they decided to overbuild it just to take care of it.
Famously, you could drive a 1-ton Jeep through the C-47's cargo door. It could carry 28 soldiers, and often more. In Burma, one RAF Dakota evacuates 65 walking wounded. The C-47s and Dakotas haul troops and supplies to every theater of the war.
The C-47 was critical for the war effort. General Eisenhower claimed it's one of the most important war-winning weapons that the Allies had.
Perhaps the C-47's finest hour comes at the most critical moment of the war. On the eve of D-Day, Julian Bud Rice flies an unarmored C-47 carrying 21 paratroopers across the English Channel and into a barrage of enemy fire.
You could see the anti-flak burst coming from the ground and the tracer bullets coming up. It was almost impossible to avoid everything, so you were lucky just to take some machine gun fire.
Your 6-minute warning, rise and shine!
As his C-47 enters the drop zone 8 kilometers from the French coast, 21-year-old Don Jakeway prepares for the most terrifying moment of his young life.
The jump master stood there in the door.
Okay, go, 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 go!
And if you froze in the door, he had orders to shoot you.
1, 2.
When we jumped, the bullets were going up. You could hear the zit, like going through your chute. You know the Germans are there, and the moment you jump in as a paratrooper, you're surrounded and scared to death.
821 C-47s fly in the first wave. Astonishingly, all but 21 of them deliver their human cargo to the drop zone and return home safe, including Bud Rice.
The plane took a lot of hits. I was very fortunate. I came back safe and sound. Had no problem.
Don Jakeway goes on to spend nearly 8 months fighting his way through occupied Europe before being shot by a Nazi sniper. At a hospital in Belgium, he encounters an old friend.
I can see this C-47. It was a hospital ship. It had all the bunks and wounded.
For every man killed during the invasion, at least 3 are wounded. 8,000 on D-Day alone. Now, the same C-47s that delivered paratroopers into battle become flying ambulances, often using roughly improvised airstrips. The plane they called the Goonie Bird evacuates 750,000 wounded men from all over the world.
There was no sustained air transport enterprise that enabled the Axis powers to supply their forces routinely in the way that the Allies did, thanks largely to the C-47.
The C-47 would also leave a lasting legacy on military strategy.
When NATO responds to a crisis, how does it do so? It does so with modern airlift capability. And that modern airlift capability is rooted in the experience of the C-47 and the Dakota back in the Second World War.
Even though the last DC-3 was built in 1946, there are still hundreds of working DC-3s in the air. It is the only pre-war aircraft still flying commercially. Rob Bolling and his DC-3 deliver cargo to Catalina Island off the coast of California.
It's very cool that this thing survived. It's a testament to the airplane that it's survived this long. I know it's a really good designed airplane, so I feel privileged to get to fly something like this. It's a piece of history.
Rob moves 1,300 tons of freight every year, whatever the conditions.
It's very controllable with difficult crosswinds. It's right there for you the whole way down as long as you treat it right.
Despite being 69 years old, his DC-3 is still a rugged and economical cargo plane.
That's the good thing about the DC-3. It can move stuff for not a lot of money.
Back in 1945, thousands of surplus military aircraft are being sold off for scrap. But the C-47 gets a new lease on life. Its speed, range, and ruggedness make it the plane of choice for a new era of global air travel.
It was the demobilized C-47s and Dakotas, now back in civil service, that enabled the expansion of air transport all around the world. It became an iconic global airlifter.
The reborn DC-3 proves the perfect plane for small regional airlines to spread affordable air travel to every corner of America and Europe.
And an awful lot of airlines, particularly in the United States, but around the world now, could buy, for a very low price, a real first-rate airplane.
By 1946, there are 1,500 DC-3s flying primarily short-haul routes all over the globe.
The DC-3 was entering a second generation. It was no longer the primary airplane of most airlines, but it was ideal for local service routes. You can get in and out of anywhere.
Thousands of ex-service pilots are arriving home to their small towns across the US, looking for jobs. Many of them will take to the skies again, this time for peaceful purposes.
Now the DC-3s cost next to nothing. You could start an airline for next to nothing, and with some luck, turn it into a viable airline. And quite a few did that. And then introduced flying to thousands more people, because now it was more affordable.
Yet even as the peacetime civil aviation boom gathers pace, the DC-3 is again called to assist in a new conflict threatening the globe. On June 24, 1948, Stalin fires the first salvo of the Cold War. The Soviets mount a blockade of Berlin, cutting off supplies to the sectors of the city under Allied control. The aim? To starve the people into submission and annex the city.
As conquerors, the Russians are treating the Germans with the calculated severity due an enemy people.
In the British sector, one young Berliner lives with her parents and two younger sisters. When the blockade begins, Stephanie Plum is just 16 years old.
They closed the roads, they closed the seaways, they closed everything. Conditions were very bad. We had just gone through a war, and really, Berlin was demolished.
The main power station is in Soviet-controlled East Berlin, leaving locals at the mercy of the Russians.
Whenever they felt like it, they shut the electricity off, the water off. There was not enough food. The children were the first ones to go.
The situation is bleak. But what the Berliners don't know is that the Allies are hatching a rescue plan. And at its heart is the C-47. June 1948, Berlin. The Soviets are blockading all food supply routes into the city's Allied-controlled sectors. 2 million Berliners are on the brink of starvation.
My little sister cried all the time. Cried because she was hungry, and all we gave her was water.
Like many other Berliners, Stephanie Plum is driven to desperate measures.
In the apartment we were living in, there were reams of white tissue paper. I found them, what a find. So we ate the tissue paper with a little water. And the Russians thought, you know, Americans would give us up. No, they didn't. They didn't.
The Allies mount an airlift of unprecedented scale to fly in essential supplies and break the blockade. With their 3-ton payload, the C-47 and the Dakota are the obvious choice to lead the charge. On June 26, 1948, the first C-47s land in Berlin.
We heard the planes coming. We thought, what are they going to do? They're bringing food? What's going on?
A plane lands every 30 seconds. The Allies ship in thousands of tons of coal, food, soap, drinking water, milk, and medical supplies. Stephanie Plum disobeys her parents to go and see the Allied planes at Tempelhof Airport.
The Germans came like ants when a plane landed, cleaned it out, took everything out, fuel in, and the plane went off. And this went on 24 hours. Never was there a stop. Constantly. In thunderstorms, in the rains going sideways, in foggy skies, no landing lights. The sky was for a year, never without planes.
But bringing salvation to so many is not without sacrifice. There are 25 plane crashes during the airlift. Pilots must navigate a narrow flight corridor under constant harassment from Soviet planes flying dangerously close. On July 25, 1948, a C-47 smashes into a building as it is landing, killing both American pilots.
They were still carrying the wreckage off, and the Germans put up a little memorial plaque.
In all, 101 airmen and civilians lose their lives ferrying in the supplies. The airlift continues non-stop for nearly a year. By the time the humiliated Soviets lift the blockade in May 1949, the C-47s and their successor C-54s had clocked up 150 million kilometers. It's an astonishing achievement.
These planes came to feed us and to be good to us. We never forgot what was done to us by the Americans. It was so beautiful, and it still is.
The C-47 goes on to see further conflict in Korea and even in Vietnam, where it's the oldest military plane in service. But by the 60s, its visionary creator is ready to hang up his slide rule.
One day, Donald Douglas went to a meeting with an airline about a new model. And he looked around the table, and all of them are accountants and lawyers. There are no engineers, there are no scientists, there are no visionaries, and the fun went out. The world was aging around him and changing, and he didn't care for it.
After the war, numerous aircraft designers try and fail to create a replacement for the DC-3. It's dubbed the Holy Grail of airplane design. But nothing can match the versatility, rugged reliability, and economy of the DC-3.
The engineers and the designers at the time knew that they knew a great deal. They also knew they did not know a great deal. So they made the airplanes then a lot stronger and a bit heavier than we would today. But because of that, the likes of the DC-3s are still flying, almost unbreakable.
The DC-3 story spans more than 2/3 of the entire history of powered flight. It's an airplane that wins the hearts of all those who've flown her.
It was wonderful. It was a wonderful plane to fly. Very easy to fly.
And I've seen them come in with holes in the wings and the motor shot out and everything else. That C-47 is one of the best airplanes that's ever built.
The DC-3 makes global air travel routine, accelerating the rise of the industrial economies.
DC-3 makes the point to the flying public that it's safe and comfortable to fly. It makes the case for the airlines that they can actually make money.
Many argue that no other single airplane has left such a broad and lasting legacy on air transportation.
If we take a look at air transport, how it evolved right up to the era of the jumbo jet, at the heart of all that is the experience with the Douglas DC-3 back in the 1930s and the 1940s. It is truly the linchpin of American and global air transport.
The genius and hard work of engineers at Douglas Aircraft Company created a standard of modern airplane design that fundamentally changed the way large airplanes are built, right up to the present day.
There's a little bit of the DC-3 in every airplane that flies today, no matter where that airplane comes from.
The SR-71 Blackbird, the world's fastest stealth spy plane. It flew faster than a rifle bullet. 3 times the speed of sound.
It looks like it's part spaceship, part airplane. And when you see it in the air, it's a piece of artwork.
Even now, 50 years later, it's still the fastest and highest man has ever flown without rocket propulsion.
The Blackbird is the iconic aircraft of high-speed supersonic cruise.
It was a multi-million-dollar gamble that stretched 60s aviation technology to the limits.
Incredibly forward-thinking design on this. No high-powered, computers, just rooms of people with slide rules and calculators.
The thing that's special about the Blackbird was it was all miracles.
Blackbird pilots risked their lives to fly at the edge of the possible.
It was just breathtaking when we realized what we were going to be doing.
These basically became sentinels, if you will, for the free world.
Its greatest legacy, helping maintain peace when the world was on the brink of nuclear war. January 1966. 2 ace test pilots prepare for a critical experimental flight. The plane they're about to fly is an ultra-fast covert military jet, and it's just been modified to maximize performance. In the cockpit is a pilot with 4,000 flying hours under his belt, Bill Weaver.
We took off about 11 something in the morning. We headed out on the program route. Everything was okay, routine.
In the back seat is reconnaissance expert Jim Zweyer.
Copy that.
Flying at Mach 3.2, Weaver banks into a turn. And without warning, one of his engines stalls.
It's a very startling event. You could never prepare yourself for them. It was once described by one of the pilots as like being in a train wreck.
At over 3,000 kilometers an hour, the unbalanced plane is impossible to control. It pitches into a catastrophically steep climb.
I had to stick full left corner of the cockpit and no response to the airplane at all. I knew that we were just going to be along for the ride when that happened.
Inside 2 seconds, the plane starts to break up.
The airplane just basically disintegrated around us.
The quest to build the world's fastest spy plane is on the edge of disaster. The story of the SR-71 Blackbird begins 9 years earlier, at the height of the Cold War. In 1957, the Soviet Union develops intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Here Khrushchev boasts that Russia already has intercontinental missiles in mass production.
The threat of a direct nuclear strike on US cities makes gathering intelligence on the Soviets' nuclear arsenal a top priority.
Well, in any conflict, knowledge is power. And we had to find out what the Soviet Union was doing, particularly with a missile program.
We had a vital need to understand the capabilities of the Soviet military machine, but the Soviet Union was so vast that we could not gain this by using conventional aircraft.
America needs specialist spy planes to fly reconnaissance missions deep into Soviet territory without being detected by radar and shot down by enemy jets. In late 1957, the CIA asks defense contractor Lockheed to come up with a new undetectable spy in the sky. They would call it Project Archangel, led by aviation genius Kelly Johnson.
Kelly Johnson undoubtedly is the Leonardo da Vinci of aviation design.
The difference in him and other airplane designers is he had a vision of the future and the art of the possible.
I had a great relationship with him. Yeah, I trusted him. He was almost a father figure to me.
Johnson had worked for Lockheed since 1933. He'd put together a small maverick design team just outside Los Angeles, nicknamed the Skunk Works. Johnson's team had designed several military planes, including a supersonic jet fighter, the iconic Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. By the late 50s, Skunk Works was at the top of its game.
The factor that makes the Skunk Works different than other airplane design organizations is that they assume it can be done and then figure out how to do it.
Back in 1955, Kelly Johnson had created America's first plane specifically designed for spying. The U-2 was a single-engine jet plane that could fly at altitudes of 20,000 meters, which according to US intelligence was 1,500 meters above the reach of Soviet radar.
The idea behind the U-2 was to fly so high that the very sophisticated Russian radars would not be able to detect it.
In 1956, the U-2 flew its first operational mission over Soviet territory. It returned safely with valuable intelligence. But the onboard device the plane carried to detect radar waves delivered some bad news. Soviet radar had tracked its every move.
From our estimates, if the U-2 were to fly above a certain altitude, it could not be detected. The problem is we were wrong. The Soviet radars were better than we thought they were.
The only comfort was that the Soviets had no means of downing the U-2 at this altitude. Yet. The Skunk Works team knew it was only a matter of time before Russian missile technology would catch up, with disastrous consequences. They would have to deliver the new undetectable spy in the sky, and fast. 50 years after it was built, the SR-71 Blackbird still holds the record as the world's fastest manned plane using air-breathing engines.
The amazing thing about the Blackbird is that it instills emotion in anyone, not just airplane enthusiasts. It looks like it's part spaceship, part airplane. And when you see it in the air, it's a piece of artwork.
Even more extraordinary, it pioneered the idea of stealth technology with a design that was almost impossible for enemy radar to detect. But reaching this pinnacle of aviation technology wasn't easy. In the spring of 1958, Skunk Works starts work on Project Archangel, the CIA's top-secret plan to replace the vulnerable U-2 spy plane. Kelly Johnson knows the new design will have to fly much higher than its predecessor to evade advancing Soviet radar systems. And also much faster to get out of trouble even if detected.
As the missile threat evolved, speed now became very, very important. And so if you have a fast-moving target that may be also turning or maneuvering itself, it poses a very difficult challenge to an intercepting missile.
But the CIA wants more. The order for a new super spy plane had come from President Eisenhower himself. And he wants it to be invisible to radar. Achieving radar invisibility seemed near impossible. When radio waves from a radar transmitter strike a plane's circular fuselage, they scatter in many directions, producing an obvious and distinctive radar signature. Reducing this signature will require nothing less than a radical rethink of aviation design. Yet, in 1958, the idea of such stealth technology is in its infancy. And delivering it, alongside high altitude and high speed, will test Skunk Works' abilities to the limits.
The Skunk Works team began looking at designs to meet these requirements of higher than 80,000 feet, faster than 2,000 miles per hour, as well as being reduced in radar cross-section.
Over 11 months, Skunk Works engineers draft 10 designs, each prefaced with the letter A for Archangel. Some aim for a reduced radar signature, others to achieve speed or height. None manage all three. The front runner is the A-10, capable of flying far higher than the U-2 and at over 3 times the speed of sound, Mach 3.2. But performance comes at a price. Its shape will make it highly visible to radar. In March 1959, things become critical at a meeting with the CIA's head of black operations. Kelly Johnson argues that the A-10 is the best design, despite its radar visibility. Designed to fly so high and so fast that even if detected, the Soviets will have no time to react.
There was always a debate from the time of the U-2 onwards about which was the best way to defend a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft.
The CIA knows the president isn't about to settle for speed over stealth. It looks like the end of the road for Project Archangel. On the brink of losing the contract, Skunk Works throw themselves at the radar visibility problem one last time.
The M Lab was trying to come up with the answer for that. Yeah, we spent a lot of time and money trying to develop stealth.
The challenge? To modify the plane's profile without compromising performance. 2 months later, one of the engineers makes a breakthrough. He takes the existing design and adds elements from other Project Archangel designs that reduce radar signature. The result is a radical new, streamlined look. The new design has a flatter underbelly and sleeker lines. When radio waves encounter this plane, instead of bouncing back to enemy radar receivers, they should deflect harmlessly away, along the flattened fuselage. The result? An incredible 90% reduction in the radar cross-section.
The radar cross-section was something like 10 meters. You know, that's a big eagle, or it's a very small airplane.
Now, the new spy plane faces the ultimate test. Will it convince the CIA? Kelly Johnson tells the agency the new plane will fly 8 kilometers higher than the U-2, at 3 times the speed of sound, and all the while presenting the radar profile of a large bird. On February 11th, 1960, the CIA approves a $96 million contract for Skunk Works to build a dozen spy planes, now called the A-12. There is no time to waste, because just 3 months into the project, disaster strikes. On May 1st, 1960, a U-2 spy plane is shot down by a missile in Soviet airspace. The pilot, Francis Gary Powers, survives. He is put on trial in Moscow and paraded in front of the media, together with his once top-secret spy plane. It's an ominous sign of how fast Soviet technology is developing. Because Powers' plane had been downed by a state-of-the-art radar-guided surface-to-air missile, the Dvina SA-2.
We knew the U-2 was going to be very limited from that point on in terms of random overflying anywhere in the country. So in that sense, the technology of the other countries were catching up to us.
More than ever, the United States needs a spy plane that can't be shot down. Skunk Works feels the pressure. Building a plane with the futuristic qualities they'd promised the CIA is a monumental challenge. The downing of a U-2 spy plane by the Soviets in 1960 increases the pressure on Skunk Works to deliver its futuristic replacement. The new plane is supposed to cruise at a record-breaking Mach 3. But flying at 3 times the speed of sound throws up some fundamental problems. First, a conventional aluminium airframe is out of the question. Because at over 3,000 kilometers an hour, the friction created by airflow alone will heat the airframe to over 300 degrees Celsius. Skunk Works knows aluminium loses its strength at 150 degrees, which for a Mach 3 airplane is barely breaking a sweat.
There were places on the Blackbird that were 600, 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Your oven at home goes to 550 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you had to look for materials that could survive those kinds of temperatures.
And that's not all. To reach high altitudes, an airframe has to be light. But to fly supersonic, it must also be robust. There is only one material that meets all the demands: titanium. But the leading producer of the rare metal is the Soviet Union.
The trick of how do you acquire the titanium and the volume necessary while not giving away the fact that you were building something like the Blackbird was a security challenge.
The titanium is bought through dummy companies so that the Soviets don't realize their customer is the CIA. But working with it is uncharted territory.
So how do you machine it? How do you form it? How do you assemble it? A lot of that had to be created on the fly.
Titanium is so hard that it damages standard machining equipment, forcing Skunk Works to develop new manufacturing processes. "300-degree temperatures pose another problem. Metal expands when hot. To ensure the plane's panels fit together tightly when flying supersonic, they need to fit loosely while on the ground. No big deal, except when it comes to the fuel tanks.
There's no internal bladder tanks. There's no internal metal tanks. The skin of the airplane is the tank.
As a result, it was a leaky airplane. You would see this aircraft sitting on the ground with a puddle of fuel under it.
Traditional aviation fuel is highly volatile and liable to explode at the high temperatures generated in flight. So Skunk Works asked Shell to develop a brand new fuel, an exotic mix of hydrocarbons and lubricants with exceptionally low volatility, which they call JP7.
I've seen the crew chiefs throw cigarette butts and matches. It extinguishes, it won't catch on fire.
This is just one of many ingenious solutions that Johnson's team devises to overcome a string of engineering challenges.
Kelly wanted the simplest answer you could have. One of his rules was one miracle per program. The thing that's special about the Blackbird was it was all miracles.
By the spring of 1962, people in Arizona begin to see strange craft streaking through the skies near the top-secret Area 51. It's the latest version of the Skunk Works A-12 spy plane. The sightings fuel talk of UFOs.
And so you start seeing bar talk develop. You start seeing people reporting what's going on. And in some cases, they're met by people in suits who take them away and tell them, don't talk about what you saw.
2 years later, Skunk Works believe they've made an even better version of the plane, a two-seater. And in 1964, the government decides to scotch the rumors of UFOs and unveil it. The new spy plane, destined for the US Air Force, will be called Reconnaissance Strike, RS-71. But the speech by President Johnson doesn't go as planned.
I would like to announce the successful development of a major new strategic manned aircraft system. This system employs the new SR-71 aircraft and provides a long-range...
When President Johnson announced it, he got the designation backwards. It should have been RS-71, but he said SR-71, and it sounds better, and the name stuck.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff.
The Air Force decide it's easier to rename the aircraft than to correct the president's error.
And of course, no one wished to contradict the president, so from that point on, SR-71 it was.
Now, the entire world knows the SR-71 has put America back in the aerial spying game. It's time to put the SR-71 through its paces. December 22nd, 1964. A Blackbird completes its final flight checks at Lockheed's Plant 42 in Palmdale, California. It is the first official test flight of the SR-71. Test pilot Bob Gilliland has the dangerous privilege of being first in the cockpit. He has been handpicked by Kelly Johnson himself.
One glance and you could see it was high and fast and big and long. There were a whole lot of guys around the world that would like to have been in my position, but I was in the one that Kelly wanted to do it with, and so that's a hell of a high honor for me, and maybe perhaps my highest honor of all.
Every test flight has what are called open items, unresolved technical issues. But on this day, Gilliland knew there were 383 of them. Initially, Kelly Johnson and Gilliland agree not to push the plane too hard.
Kelly had said it's considered a successful flight if we just take off, leave the landing gear down, fly around and come back in and land. But then he says to me, how do you feel about going supersonic on the first flight? So I said, I have great confidence in our escape system here, so it's okay with me.
Gilliland's test flight breaks the sound barrier, reaching speeds of 1,600 kilometers an hour, cruising at 15,000 meters, over 3 kilometers higher than a commercial jetliner. But extreme performance demands extreme concentration. The tiniest error can spell disaster.
The pilots referred to the Blackbird as being a 3-second airplane. Every 3 seconds, you had to look at the instruments and make sure everything was working the way it was supposed to.
I got on down there for landing, and Kelly says, how's your fuel state? I said, excellent. So he says, well, how about a flyby? So we did a flyby.
The first flight is a great success. The Blackbird program is airborne. But the flight tests are about to face setback and tragedy. In January 1966, a crucial test flight for the Blackbird SR-71 spy plane is about to run into trouble. On board are pilot Bill Weaver and reconnaissance specialist Jim Zwayer. 24,000 meters up after losing control at Mach 3, the plane starts to disintegrate. At Edwards Air Force Base, Weaver and Zwayer's Blackbird disappears from the tracking radar. Both crew members are presumed dead. Fellow test pilot Bob Gilliland is on the base when he hears the news.
I found out it was Bill Weaver, and his locker was near mine, and there were 2 cigars.
Gilliland takes one of his friend's cigars to smoke in his memory.
I said, well, he may be dead, and if he is, I'll get him a whole box of cigars.
But Bill Weaver isn't dead. He had been free-falling from the very edge of space.
I thought I was having a terrible dream, a nightmare. And then I realized I wasn't dreaming, so I must be dead. And then I realized that I'm not dead, and somehow I'm out of the airplane. I could feel myself falling. I could hear the rushing of air.
Weaver doesn't know if his parachute is still attached until it springs open. Now his thoughts turn to his flying mate, Jim Zwayer.
Jim Zwayer's parachute looked like it was about a quarter mile away. That was really a relief. I didn't think either one of us was going to survive, but to think that both of us had was tremendous relief.
Weaver lands in New Mexico, 1,200 kilometers from the base. On the ground, he learns the sad news. His friend Jim has not survived after all. His neck broken. He had died the instant the plane disintegrated.
To find out that he had died, it was really devastating. He was a wonderful guy, but he was one of the best.
An investigation found that optimizing the plane's performance had made it less stable. That led to a loss of control, which put the airframe under catastrophic strain. At the base, a call comes through to the accident investigation chief.
He says, yes, I will take a collect call from Mr. Bill Weaver. and then I heard that, and I knew he'd survived, so I was real thrilled at that. I told him I was going to get the Castro's best cigars I could find. I don't know, but naturally I would do anything for him.
He said he was going to get me expensive replacements, and I haven't gotten them yet. That was 1966.
By 1967, Skunk Works finds solutions to all the Blackbird's design problems. The planes go fully operational from Beale Air Force Base, California. Now, America just needs the men to fly them. A new group of elite pilots is assembled to join the 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing. They are the best of the best.
None of us had ever seen the airplane. And you can't imagine what that felt like to see that airplane come in. It was just breathtaking when we realized what we were going to be doing.
The Blackbird doesn't so much break records as shatter them. It can fly at 3 times the speed of sound, faster than a rifle bullet.
It was kind of a good feeling to know that anytime you were flying, you were going higher and faster than any other person in the world.
Its engines are the most powerful of the time, producing 160,000 horsepower. And swallowing 3,000 cubic meters of air every second, equivalent to 2 million people inhaling at once.
You've got so much power, it's smooth, it's quiet, it's just delightful.
It can fly an astonishing 25 kilometers above the Earth, applying a navigation system that used the stars to work out its position.
I mean, it's the world's biggest planetarium show.
You can see the curvature of the Earth. You can see almost 350 miles in any direction.
Unbelievable what you see at 80,000 feet or higher. Just fantastic.
Ironically, the Blackbird will never see active service over the Soviet Union, the role for which it was designed. But within a year, it will be called to operate in the heat of battle. March 1968, Vietnam. A daunting theater of war for the Blackbird's first combat mission. Its objective? To find an enemy Viet Cong site deep in the jungle, a supply area used to mount the siege of US Marines at Khe Sanh. The Blackbird delivers. Its high-resolution ground mapping radar reveals the secret site, enabling B-52 bombers to attack, ending the siege. The Blackbird goes on to give the intelligence community critical photographic and ground mapping data from all over the world.
Then you come back, and the intelligence community is just on it like ants on sugar. Okay, what has changed? Have they brought in some new defensive system, or what are we seeing here that's different from the last time we flew an area?
The SR-71 then went on to become the nation's premier reconnaissance system for keeping track of international crises. Whether it was the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, watching the Soviet fleet and its movements, we had SR-71s deployed to the Far East, operating out of Kadena. These basically became sentinels for the free world. Tremendous contributions of technical intelligence.
But the Blackbird is no longer invisible. In 1968, it is tracked by enemy radar for the first time. And as surface-to-air missiles grow ever more effective, Blackbird crews will soon face a direct attack. August 26, 1981, North Korea. The communist regime of Kim Il-sung is flexing its military muscles. Fearing an invasion of the democratic South, the West desperately needs intelligence.
We had to understand what is happening with the North Korean order of battle. What is their intention? Where are their forces? What are they up to? What are they doing? And there was only one system that could furnish that information, and it was the SR-71.
17 years after its first flight, the Blackbird is still the world's best spy plane. Now, it'll fly secret missions to locate the North Koreans' anti-aircraft missiles.
Okay, just leveling out. No problems, Captain.
Pilot Maury Rosenberg is tasked with flying over the DMZ, a demilitarized zone between North and South, but one known to be within reach of enemy missiles.
Most of the missions were through the DMZ, where we would make anywhere from 3 to as many as 4 passes, east to west, west to east, etc.
That's looking good. Looking real good.
The plane carries equipment to warn of enemy radar activity.
Nothing yet.
Rosenberg and his reconnaissance specialist, Ed McKim, complete 2 passes without the monitor lighting up.
This aircraft, though, even on a training flight, let alone an operational flight, you never really relax. You're always watching everything.
Okay, McGinn, we're going around one more pass. Keep calling the shots for me, okay? Okay, Skip, looking good.
Then, on their final run home, Ed McKim's monitor picks up an enemy radar lock signal.
Oh, wait a minute, I got a trace here. What do you got, buddy? Yeah, just checking on that.
It's what SR-71 crews call getting painted.
We were on our last pass, and Ed was an old pro by now, so when the sight locked on, he was in a relatively calm voice, and he said, "Oh, they're looking at us, they're painting us."
problem. They do that all the time.
They've been spotted. The North Koreans haven't fired on a spy plane yet, but they do sometimes fake a signal to make the crew think they're under missile attack.
Wait a minute, I got something.
And as we're progressing, he says, he said they've simulated a missile launch.
Yeah, we have a launch. We have a simulated launch. Copy, simulated launch. Simulated launch.
Accustomed to fake launch signals, the crew aren't concerned. They only need to worry if the missile responds, which means it is in the air and on its way.
Okay. It's all good. It's all good.
And I started taking a peek over the nose of the airplane, and then in a higher voice and a little higher pitch, I hear Ed said, "Oh my God, the missile answered."
Missile is answered. Missile is answered. We have a live missile. Live missile. Copy that. Live missile climbing on your right-hand side. I don't see it.
A radar-guided surface-to-air missile is racing through the air at 2,500 kilometers an hour.
Still climbing. Okay, I see it. Visual.
About that time is when I actually had picked the missile up. I would guess that it was in the neighborhood of 40 to 50,000 feet already. And the next few seconds, I could tell it was rapidly climbing.
August 1981, and in the midst of renewed hostilities, North Korea has fired a Soviet-made guided missile at a Blackbird spy plane.
Okay, I see it. Visual.
Aircrew Maury Rosenberg and Ed McKim have less than 1 minute to impact.
It's climbing.
The window to shoot the missile and the missile to get to us is less than about 50 seconds.
All pilot Rosenberg can do is try to outmaneuver the missile.
And Ed said, "Let's turn off track." And I said, "Okay." So we started to turn towards the left. Obviously, we didn't want to go right into North Korea.
But he doesn't have the agility of a fighter jet.
Should be with you. Still climbing.
Once I had a good visual and I could see it, and as we started to turn, I could see the missile didn't change course.
Contrails out. Yeah, she's gone. Missile exploded.
The Blackbird is saved by its speed. The enemy just don't have time to recalculate the target coordinates and redirect the missile.
I saw the missile go by on the right side and explode. It's hard to judge distance at altitude because there's no reference. So I'm guessing that the missile was probably within a mile and a half of the aircraft.
I was a little close.
At Mach 3, that's equivalent to just 2 seconds from impact.
I actually felt pretty relieved when we got on the ground that nothing else happened.
Just as Kelly Johnson had predicted, even when it is detected, the Blackbird proves just too fast to catch. The Soviets even developed the MiG-25 jet fighter to bring it down. But not a single SR-71 is ever lost to enemy fire. An unmatched record.
There was really no weapon system that we knew of that could touch the Blackbird.
9 years later, and the Blackbird is still the world's fastest spy plane. But now, a new technology is taking over its role. Satellites are considered to be the future of intelligence gathering. In March 1990, the Blackbird program is shut down. On its final flight before retirement, the Blackbird creates a speed record that is still unbroken. It flies from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in just 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 20 seconds. It's a poignant moment for everyone in the program, and for some, difficult to comprehend.
There were many of us, myself included, that believed that the retirement of the Blackbird was premature. Just months after the program was canceled, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and the system that we really needed on hand immediately to find out what was going on was the Blackbird.
Today, the Blackbird's stealth technologies live on. The B-2 stealth bomber and Lockheed's stealth ground attack F-117A Nighthawk use the same kind of radar-diffusing black paint as that pioneered on the SR-71. 5 decades after it was built, the SR-71 Blackbird is still one of the world's most iconic planes. It has even appeared in Hollywood movies like Transformers and X-Men. To this day, it's the fastest and highest flying manned airplane that's not rocket-powered.
The Blackbird was revolutionary because it was the first aircraft designed for sustained flight at 2,000 miles per hour. It was the first stealth airplane ever designed. Everything about the Blackbird was special because of what the engineers asked it to do.
It has come to epitomize the perseverance, ingenuity, and patriotism of the men and women who built it, and of those who flew it in the service of 6 presidents.
It's an airplane that could make a statement. You know, you can't get us. We're here. We're watching you.
The Blackbird proved what we can do when we rise to conquer an impossible challenge.
I think one of the lessons of the SR-71 is you give men and women a task and give them the authority and the resources. It's amazing what you can create.
But perhaps the Blackbird's greatest legacy is as the aircraft that helped maintain peace when the world was on the brink of nuclear war.
It was the fastest airplane ever built. It helped win the Cold War, and that ought to be a pretty good little achievement.
The Airbus A380, the world's biggest passenger plane. As tall as a 7-story building, it can carry more than 850 passengers.
Nothing bigger has been attempted ever by any aircraft manufacturer on this planet.
It was designed to take on the world-beating Boeing 747, a high-stakes gamble.
We're talking billions in terms of development. You're betting the future of the company.
The plane's sheer size brought logistical challenges on a scale never seen before.
Its real problem is just its size. I mean, it is gargantuan.
Nobody knew if a plane this big would be safe.
What happens if you have an emergency and you need to evacuate?
Or how it would respond in a crisis.
I'd never seen damage like this before on an aircraft.
This is the story of the world's only Super Jumbo. Singapore, November 4th, 2010. Qantas Flight 32 takes off from Changi Airport on an 8-hour flight to Sydney, Australia. The A380 Super Jumbo is the biggest jetliner ever built. It has been flying for 3 years without serious incident and is the pride of the Qantas fleet. In command, Captain Richard de Crepigny.
About 3.5 minutes after takeoff, we were passing through 7,000 feet.
And suddenly there was this enormous bang.
The alarm was sounding continuously. The top panel became a sea of red lights. We knew that something was seriously wrong.
An engine has exploded, sending shrapnel ripping through the wing, damaging the plane's hydraulics and engine controls.
I've never seen damage like this before on an aircraft.
The plane's systems are barely responding, and de Crepigny has no idea if he can get it down safely. The story of the Airbus A380 begins in 1988 in Toulouse, France. Jean Pierson, president of Airbus, is intent on shaking up the aviation world. He wants to establish Europe as a major player in aviation construction, a business dominated by America.
When Airbus first entered the market in the early 1970s, the U.S. airlines basically didn't pay attention to them. They didn't take European airplanes seriously at this time.
Airbus is already producing small and mid-sized planes, but only has 15% of the global market. In order to grow, Airbus must challenge the biggest name in aviation, Boeing. In 1988, the American giant makes nearly 2/3 of all commercial planes, including the mighty 747.
Jean Pierson didn't like the fact that if you wanted to buy an aircraft with 400 seats, there's only one place you could go for it, which was Seattle and Boeing.
And Pierson, known by his colleagues as the Bear of the Pyrenees, rarely backs down.
This is an interesting nickname, the Bear of the Pyrenees. He was a very forthright chief executive.
He was a very strong personality, could be very tough.
Pierson is going to go for the jugular by targeting the jewel in the Boeing crown, the mighty 747. Launched in 1970, the 747 is the world's biggest airliner, the undisputed queen of the skies.
The 747 has been a legendary aircraft, there's no question about it.
The 747 made aviation available to the masses. It transformed airline economics.
Dubbed the jumbo jet, the 747's size allowed airlines to fly more passengers at a lower cost and make huge profits.
If you have a bigger aircraft, on a per seat basis, you get a better economy.
And as the only company producing a jumbo jet, Boeing has reaped the rewards.
Boeing had enjoyed 30 years of monopoly with the 747.
Boeing were by far the market leaders, and they controlled almost the entire market.
Pierson's dream takes a step forward when his head of aircraft development shows him a plan for an audacious new aircraft.
He presented this idea to Jean Pierson, showing a concept, very large commercial airplane, even bigger than the 747.
There was no law in airline market that the largest aircraft should forever be the 747.
Pierson reasoned that an Airbus Super Jumbo would be a game changer. By carrying 25% more passengers than the 747, the airlines will be coming to Airbus instead of Boeing. But building the world's first Super Jumbo is no small undertaking. Failure could spell the end of Airbus.
We're talking billions in terms of development, so you could say you're betting the future of the company.
Pierson decides it's worth the enormous risk and orders his team to make it happen. But Airbus is a consortium of 4 manufacturers from France, Germany, Britain, and Spain. And Pierson has to convince all of them to back the colossal project.
It was really a massive undertaking and a big risk for the company, but also it was a strategic move which was essential.
It took 8 years for the project to get started in earnest. In 1996, Pierson picks a crack team to develop the Super Jumbo. It's headed by one of his most experienced engineers, Jürgen Thomas.
I was nominated as the head of a new division to be created, which we called the Large Aircraft Division.
The need for discretion means that the biggest and costliest civil aviation project of its time starts life in an abandoned office block.
We were in a, let me call it, a relatively modest building.
Absolutely no facilities, no accommodation. We had no cupboards, no nothing. Just a table, chairs, maybe a telephone.
We noticed that the windows didn't open. And so the running joke was that, of course, they did that in order for us not to commit suicide one evening of despair working hard on something that would never happen.
But Jürgen's team is not discouraged.
Nobody complained. All the people which I started with were so motivated, they didn't care.
Their secret super jumbo will eventually become known as the A380. But for now, the project is given the working name A3XX.
It was a kind of start-up atmosphere, and they were looking at lots of solutions, trade-offs, what should be the size of the aircraft, big debate at that time.
Their first big challenge is to work out how the plane can carry a record-breaking number of passengers.
Soon we realized that if we wanted to have more than 500 people on board, the only solution was to put the two cabins on top of each other. So that was really different. Two lines on windows, you know, all through the fuselage from nose to tail.
A fully double-deck jetliner has never been attempted before. Jetliners have traditionally been built with a single deck inside a round fuselage.
The optimum shape of a fuselage in terms of cross-section is always a circle.
But in a circular fuselage, the number of seats able to fit onto the top deck would be restricted by the curvature of the cabin. They need an alternative.
There were very, very different concepts by our French friends, by the German friends, but that was good because we could put all on the table and compare and say what is good or what is not so good, in which direction we should go.
Eventually, Jürgen's team selects a revolutionary new fuselage shape, the ovoid. The genius of the ovoid concept is that it will allow two full-width decks. And with the ovoid design, their super jumbo will carry up to 193 more passengers than the 747.
So the whole fuselage concept was basically around optimizing the shape for efficiency and fuel efficiency, but giving maximum comfort inside so that the passenger had that wow effect. My God, this is great, I've got lots of space, and this is a great aircraft.
But the joy is short-lived. They soon discover that Boeing has started work on a super jumbo of their own. By 1996, plans to build the world's largest passenger airliner are well underway at Airbus. But Boeing gets wind of the European super jumbo, and in September, they announce their counter-strike. Supersizing the 747 into a competitor to the A380.
The 747 next generation. Two new designs called the 747 500X and very large 600X.
The race to build a super jumbo is on, and Boeing already has a head start. Unlike Airbus, they have a loyal customer base and plenty of experience building big planes.
I must say that we were under some pressure because we were afraid that our competitor could launch their project.
We were working under this menace of having Boeing again in front of us, so that was very tense. The first months were very, very tense.
The news adds to the design pressures the team faces, of which the biggest is weight.
Aircraft, they build in volume, it's 3D, so every time you increase the size, the weight increases even more than the size.
Airbus had to work out ways of producing a big aeroplane, a giant aeroplane, without having giant weights to go with it.
The team has to look at every element of the designs to see where weight can be cut.
We had extra teams for weight chasing. That means to look at each element. No? As Boeing once said, we even look at the battery holder if we can make it lighter. So each kilo.
Then the team has a breakthrough, discovering a lightweight material called glare, a new composite of glass fiber and aluminium. But it's never been used for the main body of an aircraft before. Extensive tests show that not only will glare reduce weight by up to 30%, but it's also strong enough to be used on the plane. Yet even with this weight saving, their calculations show the A380 will still weigh 600 tons at takeoff, 40% more than the 747. And it will require bigger wings than any previous jetliner.
To lift all this mass, you'll have to size the wing accordingly. And so you go through a lot of design loops in order to find the best intersection of all the parameters that will make your aircraft feasible.
The wings will need a surface area of almost 850 square meters, 54% more than the wings of the 747. They will also be some of the most technologically advanced wings ever produced.
These wings, they almost come apart with all the flaps and the slats on it.
It's a very good wing. It's the best Airbus wing ever in aerodynamic terms. Huh? Still has a little bit high weight, but from aerodynamic point of view, it's by far the best wing.
The huge wings should create enough lift, but their size creates another problem. As planes move through the sky, they create spinning pockets of air. These unseen whirlwinds, or vortices, are known as wake turbulence.
Wake turbulence is usually linked to the weight of the aircraft. So a small aircraft, a light aircraft, has small turbulence, and bigger aircraft, bigger wake turbulence.
A very large plane could produce vortices powerful enough to rip the roofs off buildings.
If you have enormous wake turbulence and you fly over residential areas, you can do big damage.
Nobody knows exactly how big the wake turbulence for the A380 will be. So the team turns to a brand new aeronautical laboratory in Lille, France. An accurate scale model of the Super Jumbo will be launched through a curtain of smoke lit by lasers. The idea is to make the invisible turbulence visible. The test reveals that in the crowded skies above busy airports, the wake turbulence created by the giant A380 could be lethal. Smaller planes caught in its wake could be sent spiraling out of control. To ensure the A380 will enter service, Jürgen's team spends months reviewing the test data.
With these tests, of course, we learned some trends. This we should do, this we should not do. And we took very much care to minimize wake turbulence.
The team focuses on the wingtips. This is where the vortices are created when low-pressure airstreams from above the wing and high-pressure airstreams from beneath it collide. Eventually, they realize, by adding a device called a wingtip fence, they can stop the two airstreams meeting and ensure the Super Jumbo will create wake turbulence no bigger than that of a 747. By December 1996, the designs for the A380 are nearing completion. The team create a graphic showing the world what it will look like in flight. Airbus is convinced their Super Jumbo will rival Boeing's supersized 747. But in January 1997, Boeing makes a shock announcement. They are pulling out of the Super Jumbo race.
We learned that Boeing had decided to discontinue all activities on the very large airplane and discontinue the 747X program.
It should be good news for Airbus, but Boeing springs another surprise. They release research which says the world doesn't need Super Jumbos. The Super Jumbo business model depends on hub and spoke air travel. It's when large capacity planes fly between big hub airports, and then smaller planes take passengers on to their final destination. Now Boeing has declared the entire concept redundant.
Boeing decided that there are not that many routes that are so heavily trafficked and so heavily traveled consistently that would require an airplane the size of an A380.
Instead, Boeing believes the future of air travel will be on mid-sized aircraft, flying directly between smaller airports, bypassing the major hubs entirely. And when Boeing speaks, the aviation industry listens.
People tend to believe that whatever Boeing says is right. And even within Airbus, we had lots of people, the majority of the Airbus people, did not believe that going for a very large airplane was the way to go.
Nearly a decade of effort and millions of dollars may have been spent on a plane that the world doesn't need. Jean Pierson, president of Airbus, wants to build the biggest passenger airliner in history. But his rivals at Boeing have declared the world has no need for a super jumbo.
There's been a lot of naysayers, and a big one is called Boeing, I think. Very big naysayers.
The Boeing company is listened by most of the people in the industry. And so when they learned that Boeing was discontinuing its project, they said, you see, guys, there is no market over there.
But the so-called bear of the Pyrenees remains determined.
It was under Jean Pierson that the decision to continue regardless was taken.
He bashed heads together. He effectively single-handedly drove that program and drove the people that were going to make it into reality.
Former aerodynamics engineer Charles Champion is appointed to oversee the project's toughest stage, building the plane.
The clock started ticking. The real big challenge at the beginning was to create the right team, to create, the dream team that would take the largest civil aircraft ever manufactured to life and to our customers.
But before the A380 can be built, Airbus must create new factory space in 4 different countries.
I mean, it is gargantuan. And then to build something that large in parts all over Europe, and then assembling them in one location, it's a logistical nightmare.
The wings will be built in the UK, the fuselage in Germany and northern France, and the tail in Spain. Champion will have to arrange for all the parts of the Super Jumbo to travel to the Airbus assembly plant in Toulouse. Airbus has shipped aircraft wings and fuselages before in its very own transport plane, a 55-meter-long beast known as the Airbus Beluga. But even this monster plane is too small for the job. Engineers test the idea of strapping parts of the A380 to the backs of other planes, but find it simply not practical. So Champion has to come up with something new.
It was a huge challenge for the guys to design from scratch a completely new transportation system just for the 380.
After 15 months, he resorts to the unthinkable. A complex convoy of ships, barges, and massive trucks, all converging on southern France. It will demand coordination on an epic scale.
We had to design barges in order to go through Bordeaux, the old bridge, up to Langon. But then afterwards, of course, the river is too small, so we had to go by trucks. So that was a huge project. And immediately, of course, there were many challenges. Where to place the road, and what about the villages, and this and that.
In the tiny village of Levignac, the massive sections of fuselage almost touch the walls of the houses as they pass.
They literally put the wings or fuselage on tractor trailers, and they drive them through these very narrow streets in these little French towns. I honestly don't know how they do it, but they manage.
After a combined journey of more than 5,000 kilometers, the largest airplane components in civil aviation history finally arrive in Toulouse. Here, Charles Champion will oversee the construction of the biggest civilian airliner ever built. January 18th, 2005. The first prototype of the Airbus Super Jumbo is revealed to the world in a glittering ceremony.
You see all the stakeholders coming in, the head of the customers, the head of states also.
European premiers, who have invested billions of dollars of public money in the project, gather for the event in front of the world's media.
This is the most exciting new aircraft in the world. It is European cooperation working at its best.
Your heart tells you, my God, this is the best event I will ever probably attend, because I'm the one who was leading the program.
But the star of the show is the plane itself, the Airbus A380.
It's one of those emotional moments where suddenly we realize the size of what you're doing, the level of ambition, the largest aircraft ever in the world.
But behind the smiles, there is just one piece of unfinished business. The Super Jumbo is yet to fly. That test arrives 3 months later, on April 27th, 2005. A huge crowd gathers in Toulouse to see if the world's first Super Jumbo will successfully take to the skies.
April 2005, bright day in Toulouse. 40,000 people around the fences of the airport to see this. Quite an event for us. The first flight of the A380.
It's the moment of truth for the test pilots, who all wear parachutes in case disaster strikes. Flight test engineer Fernando Alonso knows how dangerous this moment can be.
When you fly an airplane for the first time, things can go wrong. There's no time to think what to do when you're up in the air. So you better have thought about what you're going to be doing before you actually take off.
Je rappelle la procédure de décollage. Pendant la course au décollage, si quelqu'un voit quelque chose qui lui plaît pas, il peut gueuler stop et j'obéirai.
3, 2, 1, stop.
Parti.
At 10:29 a.m., under a cloudless sky, the A380 accelerates down the runway. The huge machine lifts effortlessly into the sky.
Before you got a chunk of carbon, aluminium, and sitting on the ground, and then suddenly when she flies, I mean, she's alive.
It flew incredibly well. It flew beautifully from, I would say, from 1 minute after liftoff.
We had imagined this moment for years and years and years, and suddenly it happens. Wonderful day that I will remember all my life.
After 4 trouble-free hours, the A380 touches down and enters the record books as the heaviest flight in commercial aviation history. Over the next 19 months, the plane undergoes 2,500 hours of flight tests. These are an essential part of aircraft certification. But for the A380, they also serve another purpose: convincing the public that flying on such a huge plane is safe.
There was a public perception of Isn't it going to be dangerous? All those many people on the airplane? Yes, this airplane was big, but it was just another airplane, and it had to be handled and could be operated like any other airplane. It just happened to be bigger, that's all.
The test pilots pushed the A380 to its limits.
We went to very hot climates, went to very cold climates. We brought the airplane to its structural limits. We brought the airplane to our aerodynamic limits.
In one test, in order to identify the minimum takeoff speed, pilots deliberately dragged the tail along the runway. The A380 passes every test with flying colors.
The airplane behaved marvelously. I'm just so proud of this airplane. I'm just so proud of those wings. I'm just so proud of these systems.
But the plane's toughest test is yet to come. Airbus has built the largest airliner in history, and so far it has passed every flight test. Now, there's only one thing that stands between the plane and it being certified to fly. Airbus must prove that in an emergency, a full plane load of 873 passengers and crew can be evacuated in less than 90 seconds, the same length of time as an ordinary airliner.
The authorities were not prepared to say, okay, it's a big aircraft, we give you 120 seconds. No, 90 seconds is the rule, you get them out in 90 seconds.
On March 26, 2006, in Hamburg, Germany, Airbus prepares for the largest evacuation test in aviation history. To pass, everyone on board must be evacuated from half the exits in less than 90 seconds. And it must all be done in complete darkness.
It was a big challenge. It was a big challenge, and there was a fair amount of risk, because if we had failed the test, then we'd have been in trouble.
The fate of the Super Jumbo project is on the line. It's a success. All 873 people on board are evacuated in just 78 seconds, a comfortable 12 seconds under the limit. With the A380 certified for passenger service, orders are flowing in. But with a complex build, split across 4 countries, full-scale production quickly falls behind schedule.
It became apparent that the aeroplanes weren't going to be able to be built anywhere nearly as quickly as Airbus had thought.
To make matters worse, engineers installing the cabling discover a major problem. Many of the wires are too short. 2 countries, France and Germany, have been responsible for creating the A380's wiring systems, but each had insisted on using their own computer programs.
The French designers used one type of computer. The German designers stayed with the one they were more familiar with, and the computers didn't talk to one another. And had they all used the same computer, that problem would have been spotted long before it became critical.
Reality is that we had 5 different cultures. The French, the German, the Spanish, the British, but also the Airbus Central, who had a different view and different mindset.
With more than 500 kilometers of cables for each A380, this small oversight has a colossal impact.
We were having to move people from other parts of the Airbus empire into Toulouse to rewire the aeroplane.
This caused a significant delay in the delivery, also cost, as you can imagine, because the first airplane had to be dismantled and the cabling had to be revised completely from nose to tail.
The clash of cultures has left the entire project on the brink of collapse. It's already a year behind schedule and a staggering $2 billion over budget. This latest delay leads to the cancellation of the entire cargo version of the A380. Contracts lost with freight giants FedEx and UPS cost Airbus a further $5.1 billion in lost revenue.
It was extremely, extremely painful. That was a very tough lesson, very, very tough lesson.
Everything now depends on the passenger version of the A380. Singapore Airlines and the Dubai-based Emirates have orders totaling $20 billion. But with the plane so far behind schedule, no one knows if they will lose faith and pull out. The management team goes into overdrive to keep them on board.
You can lose the confidence within a matter of days, so you have to explain, you have to make people understand what has happened, even if you are not very proud of what you have done incorrectly. So that was very tense.
Luckily, the Airbus charm offensive on the passenger airlines pays off.
Not one customer cancelled a single A380 order, despite delays of between 18 months and 2.5 years.
It is nearly 20 years since the Super Jumbo project was conceived. Airbus have faced unprecedented technical and logistical challenges. But now, Jean Pierson's vision has become reality. The A380 is ready to enter commercial service. October 25th, 2007.
See you on board. Thank you.
Hundreds of passengers board a Singapore Airlines A380 for its very first commercial flight. The biggest airliner ever built stands as tall as a 7-story building and can carry up to 30% more passengers than a 747. Its wings are the biggest ever created on a jetliner.
These wings amaze me. And even today, I cannot get tired of looking at the wings. When I fly this airplane commercially, I always ask for a window seat and preferably near the wing. I just keep staring at it.
The passengers on the maiden flight share the same excitement.
Was it good? Was it good?
A lot of applause when the plane took off and when the plane landed and all of that. It was really an incredible atmosphere, not like a normal flight, I can assure you.
The cool thing is it's just a fantastic plane, and you know, I'm ashamed I'm not on the return flight as well.
From a passenger standpoint, the A380 is a remarkable airplane. You walk on board and the first thing you see is this beautiful staircase. The experience is very nice.
Inside the Super Jumbo, passengers are offered a level of luxury never before seen on an airliner. The 550 square meters of floor space allow for entire bedrooms with double beds and even showers.
It just looks different to every other aircraft. It's the flagship of every airline, so the airlines will tell you that you're on an A380, and they're very proud of that fact.
The next 3 years see orders take off. 15 international airlines have ordered 223 A380s in contracts worth an estimated $77 billion. Among the airlines queuing up to receive the Super Jumbo is German flag carrier Lufthansa. Lufthansa starts its A380 service in 2010 and today operates a fleet of 12 planes. Helmut Wagner is one of its pilots.
It's very astonishing that the A380 is more agile than nearly every other airplane I flew before. It's a very, very big airplane, but you don't feel the big airplane when you steer it.
In 2009, Airbus passes a major milestone. For the first time, more A380s than 747s are delivered to the airlines. Airbus's belief in the hub-and-spoke model of air travel has paid off.
One of the former CEOs of Boeing actually said, people don't buy 747s anymore. Obviously people were buying A380s instead.
And it appears Jean Pierson's dream of surpassing Boeing has finally been realized. But a year later, a catastrophic event will put the entire Super Jumbo project in doubt. November 4th, 2010. Qantas Flight 32 takes off from Singapore on its 6,000-kilometer journey to Sydney, with 469 passengers and crew on board. As Captain Richard de Crespigny climbs the A380 through 2,100 meters, passenger Mike Took watches a live feed from a camera mounted in the plane's tail.
I see this puff of white smoke come out of the left-hand side of the aircraft, and there was this enormous bang. And could see a big rectangular hole in the wing.
One of the plane's Rolls-Royce engines has exploded, and it's created a whole catalogue of problems for Captain de Crespigny to deal with.
Half the networks on the aircraft failed. We have holes in the wing, we have half our ailerons not providing lift, we have half our spoilers faulty, we have lost half our brakes. This is beyond any certification standard that any aircraft is designed to endure.
De Crespigny needs to get the crippled plane back on the ground. But it's too heavy, and he needs to dump fuel first. Trouble is, some of the fuel systems aren't responding. In the cabin, passengers fear the worst.
Why haven't we got down on the ground sooner? Why are we still circling after all of this time? There was perhaps something wrong that was preventing us from landing.
De Crespigny has no choice other than to land the plane 40 tons over its maximum safe landing weight. It's another thing to add to the growing list of problems he has to deal with to get the broken airliner down safely. Now, flying the right approach speed is critical.
We discovered that if we slow down 1 knot from 166 knots of our approach speed, we would get speed warnings. If we sped up 3 knots, we would run off the runway.
The co-pilot calculates that on the 4-kilometer runway, they will only have 100 meters to spare. De Crespigny lines up the aircraft for its final approach.
It almost felt as if the floor underneath our feet was rippling because we seemed to be coming in very fast.
De Crespigny's actions will now decide whether the world's biggest airliner will land or crash.
As we were passing 500 and 300 feet, the aircraft alerted us with 2 speed warnings, which said the speed is dangerously slow. Speed.
The plane touches down, but it's overweight, and only around half the brakes work.
There was no feeling that the plane was slowing down at all.
They're rapidly running out of tarmac.
We just kept hurtling along the runway. It seemed like the entire airport terminal had gone past us at 150 miles an hour.
Finally, the plane begins to slow.
We did manage to stop before the end of the runway. We have 100 meters spare. Eight fire trucks would now protect us and protect the passengers.
It's only now that the scale of the damage can be seen. An entire section of the massive engine has been ripped to shreds. The crew's safe landing of the plane was an extraordinary feat.
The Qantas crew did a remarkable job. They identified the problem, they handled the emergency incredibly professionally, and they were actually able to land the airplane safely back in Singapore with nobody injured.
De Crespigny also credits the design of the giant plane.
People often query the resilience of the A380, the largest aircraft in the sky. After QF-32, no one questions the resilience of the A380 anymore.
Immediately, the engine's manufacturers, Rolls-Royce, investigate what caused the explosion. They discover that oil from a small leak had dripped into the burning hot engine, causing a fire that triggered the blast. The firm takes responsibility for the problem and acts to prevent it happening again. It was the A380's first major incident, but the Super Jumbo had proven it was strong enough to withstand it.
Unfortunately, accidents happen, and almost every aircraft type flying, if not all aircraft types flying, have suffered at some point in their career, because engines do fail, engines do explode.
The airplane was so well designed, though, even operating as crippled as it was, it got down in one piece, and everybody on board was fine.
25 years ago, Airbus boss Jean Pierson took one of the biggest gambles in aviation history. Determined to challenge the dominance of Boeing, he staked the future of his company on a Super Jumbo.
There's always an aspect, if you like, initially of betting the farm on one big aircraft program. This one certainly beat all the rules in that respect. Nothing bigger has been attempted ever by any aircraft manufacturer on this planet.
Today, the A380 is a common sight at the world's leading airports. It regularly outsells the Boeing 747 and has helped Airbus raise its market share from 15 to 50%.
The arrival of the A380, I think, marked Airbus's coming of age in the industry. In the market above 150 seats, there are just two players, Airbus and Boeing.
But the A380 is also transforming the way we fly.
Without the A380, the airline would have to fly more frequently smaller airplanes, which means more movement, more cost, and a busier sky.
Those behind the A380 haven't just made a plane, they've made history.
Now when I go to London, and when you actually stand along the Thames close to the Tower Bridge, you see one A380 after the other coming in, and we say, my God, we did it, it's great.